to someone this morning saying, "Egads, it's another Sunday." You know, with a picture of someone hyperventilating into a paper bag. Oh. So welcome. Welcome to my mind. Oh. So let's take a moment to recall why we came here in an effort to bring our minds here, not just our bodies. It's helpful to kind of settle in and try to let go of the busyness of getting here. The busyness of planning for later. And just remember that you chose to be here. So it's okay to be here. So let your awareness focus on your body sitting here. The feel of the chair against your body, the cushion on your legs. You can even thank your body for getting you here. So remembering the reason why you came this morning, try to set a positive intention to use the time well. Combine it with the wish that it not only helps you, but that it'll ripple out to benefit those around you. Now find a gold prayer book. And please share. And turn to page 34. So at the bottom of 34, there's the 4 immeasurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So this is, the 4 immeasurables are that reminder of where we'd like our mind to go. You know, that we don't want to just
want happiness for ourselves and for our friends, our family, that we'd really like it if all living beings were free of suffering and had happiness. Because we all know that, you know, the world would be a better place if all beings were happy and free of suffering. So, checking our mind from time to time to see if it's coming from that kind of place as opposed to the kind of place that's, you know, completely me oriented, you know, can help us kind of correct our motivation from time to time, realizing, okay, it's not all about me, you know, and maybe open our hearts a little to hearing about the needs of others, which usually benefits our family and friends, because that's usually who we have around us. So has anybody seen the documentary on Fred Rogers? I watched it last night because it was on PBS last night. I think its future will be on Netflix or something, I don't know. But anyway, it's just a lovely record of how strong his intention was to benefit children and to benefit them in a way that helps them cope with daily life. And I didn't realize, because I didn't want, I mean, that wasn't part of my experience. It came after me as far as my childhood. And so I never saw it. But he tackled the issues of the day. Like even the very first week of the show, he dealt with seeing images of like Vietnam, the war in Vietnam on TV, you know, to try to help kids and their parents figure out how to, you know, handle these kinds of things in a way that allows children to be able to cope with all this information. And then when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, he had a show all about, you know, that. So it wasn't like, you know, Sesame Street in teaching language skills and these kinds of things, but it was, you know, I mean, I know Sesame Street did this too, but it, you know, but it really tried to tackle these difficult issues by allowing space for the children to express their feelings, and then, you know, kind of help them figure out ways to cope with that. You know. So it's a wonderful documentary. I encourage you to watch it, because it also has this really interesting aspect of when people started to protest his strategy of saying that, yeah, we've got a bunch of narcissistic kids who think they're special without having done anything. This is our mind, isn't it? Oh, so, but I will say that he didn't ever teach a child that you're more special than someone else. You know, it was all about everybody's special, equally special. Everybody's valuable. And I think the Buddha would agree with that, you know. And it's sort of like, doesn't even matter because we're here. It's like, why, you know, why separate us out into little categories? You know, it's just not effective. It's not an effective strategy for happiness. But I found it very interesting to see how, you know, the public's response at different times to this little children's show. So I bring that up because we're still, as adults, trying to figure it out, aren't we? We still are trying to deal with, how do I respond to, you know, our internal mental reactions to events. You know, whether it's somebody else's words or some, you know, our tire going flat, you know, these, you know, that we have we still are trying to figure out how to not let events of the world and of our own little world, you know, not throw us and cause great fear, stress, anger, anxiety, whatever. You know, so it's not just a problem for children, it continues throughout our lives, because why? Why would it continue throughout our lives?
Human beings aren't perfect.
What else isn't perfect?
Life.
Our world.
Life. I mean, good grief, you know, it's the world's a mess, as usual, you know, it's not easy. So, you know, being able to figure out ways to take care of ourselves so that we don't participate in what we feel is stress-provoking, you know. You know, so that we can step back and be, you know, if nothing else, at least not be a participant in harsh, violent, stressful, you know, actions of body and speech. And one way to do that is to work on our minds so we're not having violent, harsh, you know, stressful thinking, because that's going to produce those actions. So the Buddha taught that it's possible to do that we can in fact control our minds the way we think. And in fact, all of our habits of mind are trainings. It's just some of them aren't very skillful. They're actually counterproductive if you want happiness and contentment and peace. So recognizing what habits of mind we have that are not helpful, and then looking into what might be more effective, and then implementing that. So that's a multi-step process. So what's the first part?
Admitting that there's a problem.
Well, first you gotta even know, look, is there a problem? We might be able to assume that yes, there's probably a problem, but we want to be specific, because there isn't a generic fix to, you know, like the solution to jealousy isn't the same exactly as the solution to anger, you know, so we really have to, you know, there are nuances to all this lovely stuff. Fortunately, we don't have to find, you know, an antidote that's thought specific. We can kind of generalize. So, but first we have to just even notice how we're thinking. So we have to identify our states of mind. And we need to identify that there are many, events, especially events that press our buttons, are multi-layered. We have many different states of mind can arise, given the conditions. So being precise about what's going on in the mind. And then having an attitude of, okay, it's just like if you, I don't know, we're so judgmental in our society, it's really hard to come up with good examples. Like we can beat ourselves up over anything. So you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, you have vitamin D deficiency. It's something that probably nobody thinks is their fault. So you have vitamin D deficiency, and you go, well, is there a solution for that? And they go, well, we don't have like a cure for that, but this, either, more sunlight or getting, or taking 50,000 units of vitamin D a week might help, you know. So you go, oh, okay, and then you do that, you know. So you find a problem, find out what the solution is, and implement the solution. We want that attitude when we observe our minds. We don't want an attitude that immediately jumps to, oh, what a terrible person I am, or how mean I am, or how fearful I am, or how arrogant I am, or how, what's the opposite of arrogance? What a slug crawling from the earth I am. I don't know. So, you know, we want to respond just with an openness that says, oh, this could be a problem. You know, let me evaluate this a little more. And then we want to go, okay, yeah. I mean, if it is a problem, we go, oh yeah, this is a problem. I can see how my anger issues, you know, affect the quality of my life, and how I treat others. So, what do I do about that? You know, then you have to kind of seek out some answers. And then you try them out. You don't just read a good book and go, oh, you know, that sounds good. And then, you know, hope that it, you know, that if you sleep with it under your pillow, it, you know, your mind will change. So then you have to, like, try to implement it. What usually happens when you try to implement it? You fail. You go, I'm not going to get angry. Then you are angry. And, you know, so it really is this process of going, okay, I just, you know, that's okay. At least I noticed I was angry. You know? And so maybe the first step is trying not to do anything from that mind of anger. You know, and some things, you know, and then sometimes we need evidence that it's even possible, right? So how many people can keep themselves from cursing at their boss? Yeah, so we can do it.
That's why I can't.
We can, in fact, even if we're angry, keep our mouth shut. We have evidence of that. What allows us to do that in those moments?
Fear.
Of what? Of what?
Of being fired.
Okay, then so what? So if you get fired, no money, and you like money. Yeah. This is what we have to find. We need to find a reason that makes it just as important not to yell at our spouse as it is not to yell at the boss. You know, we have to find something that's meaningful to us that says, oh, I'd really like to quit yelling at my spouse or my partner because this is what you gotta find. Otherwise, we don't do it. We'll do it with our boss, and we don't even care about our boss. But we'll do it because that boss is in control of an aspect of our life that is important to us. You know, like having food. Food's useful, you know. So this is part of the effortful aspect of making changes, is really digging deep and finding what touches your heart enough to make you want to change an unskillful habit. Because if we skip that part or never address it, whatever changes we make probably will not be sustainable. It's sort of like they say, you know, yes, it helps if your doctor tells you to quit smoking, but ultimately you have to quit smoking for yourself. You know, you have to finally because it's, a miserable experience to quit something you're addicted to. So you have to really find, something that supports the fortitude you need to get through it. So that's the same thing with all of our disturbing states of mind. According to the Buddha, all of our disturbing states of mind come out of craving. It's the same kind of addiction work, We crave what we want for ourselves, for me and mine. And that craving can take the form of wanting more of what we like or wanting less of what we don't like. And that craving, that condition of craving that is under the mistaken impression that getting what you want and avoiding what you don't want is the source of happiness, which the Buddha says, sorry, it's wrong to begin with. So that's one problem. But this, that is this craving keeps wanting its fix. So the mind of anger thinks there's something in it for you. So we have to correct that misunderstanding and recognize, ooh, actually, there's nothing in it for me that I really want. So, but addressing this habitual response to conditions that aren't going the way we like, I'm responding with anger. We have to be able to recognize it, and we have to be able to pause, step back so that we don't immediately react. And that takes effort, because we're habitually reacting. We're so well trained to whatever our disturbing state of mind, whether it's getting angry or getting really nervous or getting sad, whatever it is, we have practiced it. So being able to just hold your horses, as your parents might have said to you, hold that energy, within, so that you don't act on it, is, you have to expend some effort doing that.
The count to 10.
The count to 10. But if you just leave it at that, so that you don't say anything, blah, 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 it'll have about the effectiveness of the fact that we all know how to not do it with our boss, but we still do it with our partner. We have to go that step further. That there are consequences outside of the workplace of losing your temper. And are those consequences a price you're willing to pay? Is it worth it? So we have to do all this reasoning to see why change might be a good choice. Because that reasoning can lead you to determination. Really okay, I don't want to lose my kids, so I'm going to learn how to control my speech and my body. No. So you get your speech and your body actions under control, and then you work with your mind so that that impulse to strike out is reduced. So it becomes your habit not to react to certain conditions in the way you used to. Does that make sense? So one of the ways that can help with this is, we have a practice in Buddhism called taking and giving, Tong Lin, which is probably giving and taking. I always get it confused. But anyway, and the teachers say you start with yourself. So what we're working towards is a mind that genuinely wishes to take on the suffering that others experience and give away all of our positive states, all our resources, you know, blah, blah, blah. The way a parent is quite willing to do for their own precious child, like when they're sick, you know, they give anything to take that illness away from the child. We want, you know, the Buddha said we're actually capable of developing that kind of mind for every living being. In the meantime, since we might not be there yet, we start with a practice of taking and giving for ourselves. You know, where we picture our future suffering, like these conditions that trigger us. And we imagine not responding in our habitual way. You know, we really look at, how would I like it to turn out? That's that, what's in it for me? You know, that's that really bringing to mind, you know, what is it that you really want? And then you picture in your mind being able to handle that circumstance in a different way. And that, in research now supports this strategy, that it's shown effective even in research, that if you have, you know, a plan of how to deal with stress, and then have an if-then scenario, and, you know, if this happens, then I'll do this, you know, that works. They tested it on parents of children with cancer who had tremendous stress when their children were having a procedure in order to treat the cancer. You know? So the parent who were present during these procedures, you know, this was a horrible condition for them to watch their children have to undergo some horribly hideous, painful treatment. And so they, you know, so what was in it for them? They didn't want their experience to negatively impact their children. They wanted to be able to support them, be there for them, you know. So, you know, that's a very strong motivation. But so by using this strategy of, you know, imagining how would you like you to be in that situation, what can help you be that way, you know, and recognizing the obstacles to being that way. That's that if-then, you know, recognizing what your triggers are, what your buttons are, you know, so that you can take care of yourself well. And have something, a plan of what to do then. So this is what we can do in our, you know, when we have a quiet, calm moment, to think about, oh, you know, my partner and I keep having these fights over the same thing, da 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 da, to kind of really start thinking about, how would I like it to go? What are my options? You know, really identify what are the kinds of things that seem to trigger something in me, you know, that make it harder, like things that scare us. It's much harder to act in a well thought out way when we're afraid. You know? So we want to recognize what kinds of things, you know, bring up fear in us so that we can take care of that. We can't make it go away because life can be scary. But we can be aware, oh, I'm scared. I have to give myself some extra cushions around my mind in order to be able to respond in a way that I would like to be able to respond. So fortunately, like in relationships, we can share that. We can say, oh, you know, I realize that whenever this subject comes up, you know, I am so terrified you're going to leave me. And so I don't function well. So you know, maybe if you could remind me that that's not on your to-do list, you know, I'll be able to hear what you're asking of me? Or just even whatever it is, you know? So sometimes we can just communicate what the trigger is. You know, sometimes when we recognize the trigger, we can just let it go. We can just realize, oh, you know, that's the phrase that my older brother used to always say that just, you know, made me feel stupid. And this person's not my older brother trying to make me feel stupid, so I can just let that go. Fortunately, some things are that simple, but other things, not so much. So, you know, communicating it, and even if you can't communicate it out there, like you wouldn't communicate that with your child, that won't help your child in this situation. But you can have that conversation with yourself. Oh, that's what it is, you know, and not beat yourself up for that, but just gently acknowledge that that's okay, that's what arises for you, okay. But it's really important also for me not to respond from that place in these ways that harm the situation. Does that make sense? So it's about taking time to finding those calm moments to kind of imagine this out. You know? So that takes effort. You have to actually think it's important enough to take a moment to check in and make this plan. Yeah.
So like for me, the way I interpret that is based on the last times I've been here is that you can only control certain amount. So a lot of times people
Of what?
Of whatever's happening.
Can't control anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, that certain amount is zero. Yeah, just wanted to be clear.
So that makes it. So like a lot of you'll get frustrated because you had this expectation, didn't work out the way you just rile yourself up. So like from what I'm hearing is that kind of go in there with lowering your expectations that you don't have control of this. It's probably not going to turn out the way you thought.
I didn't say any of those things. I just want to point that out.
Okay.
I didn't say any of those things. I didn't say go in with lower expectations or go in with thinking that you can't work it out. So, so this is something you're bringing into this conversation. So we want to look at those things, that yes, expectations are like a neon sign, blinking, danger, because our expectations, like you said, because we don't have control over expectations, if they're about someone else, are pretty meaningless. Because, unless you have a contract with them, and we know how well those work out, so, that's correct. Okay, so the second half, so continue.
So you're just kind of preparing yourself that, okay, if this happens,
I will do this.
You're kind of like bracing yourself, I guess, if you want to say it.
No, you're looking at what you know to be obstacles for you. So if this person says blah, 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 and you looked at your mind and realized those, when this is said, it's highly likely I'll get into a state of either anger, fear, whatever, So if that happens, I'm going to blah, blah, blah. You've got a strategy laid out. You're not trying to control what happens out here. You're not even trying to control the outcome of the circumstance. What you're trying to get a control over is your response. Because that's the only thing we have control over. Yeah.
So how does one deal with past trauma or negative experience that affects the expectation that goes into that?
Well, it's like recognizing, it's because I've been harmed in some way that I find these circumstances really risky. They're really charged. So we have to have this real kindness to ourselves about the difficulty with that. And we may need support. You may, if you've suffered tremendous personal trauma and your relationship's in trouble, you may need a counselor to help you have conversations that are difficult. You know, I mean, it's not, you may have to have a friend with you if you feel like, you know, you need to have a conversation with your boss and you find your boss threatening. You know, it just really depends. I mean, there's no easy answer. It's that, but it's this recognition of, you know, taking care of your side of it. You know, it's like, we can't, you know, there's nothing we can do to protect ourselves from harm. You know, there's nothing. You can stay in your house, lock your doors, lock your windows, you know, never go outside again, and, you know, an earthquake comes along. You know, I mean, it's just not possible. We can be harmed. We're vulnerable, you know. So we don't have to measure our success with whether or not we're harmed. It's about being able to see what part of me harms me. Some of that is not recognizing our obstacles and not taking care around those obstacles. You know, trying to pretend they don't exist. I'll just tough it out. You know, or we blame others for it. Because, you know, I mean, and then of course you have, I mean, if you know, if you're trying to deal with an abuser who's the, you know, that's a much more, you need really professional advice, you know, to how to resolve those things. It's not a simple matter. There's no simple fix to anything, because it all depends. Because every moment of mind is a dependent arising from the previous moments. That's why the more we can take care of our mind, the more likely our previous moments of mind will be under control, so will the next one. And then when we realize, oh, I'm now out of control, I'm under the control of my habit response of fear or anger or jealousy or greed or blame, you know. So I need to step back. If nothing else, I need to step back mentally. And depending on the severity of it, you may have to walk away. You know, but this is something that we have to just, you know, really observe. But it's doable. You know, it's just depending on the trigger and the states of mind you're coping with, you know, determines how effortful it's going to have to be, and some things take a long time. But even though they may take a long time, every moment we're more aware of what's going on in our mind, the closer we are to coming to finding some ease of mind with handling it.
Thank you.
Yeah. You don't have to become the Buddha in order to reduce your suffering. Yeah. Thank goodness. I think we'd all just give up. So, you know, so we do want to rejoice, you know, in those steps, you know, like every time you notice that you're about to lose it, whether you lose it or not. Noticing that you're about to lose it is an important piece of the steps. You know, this is a process. So going, and then, you know, okay, didn't handle that well. We go back to, okay, there's a reason why I want to handle it. There's no reason for me to give up. The fact that I have a habit of this does not make me this. And that's one of the mistakes we make. We think, you know, and we use it to blame others. Oh, you are just that way. You'll never change. You know, all of that stuff. So we do that to ourselves. And that gives us permission to not even bother trying. But the Buddha's encouraging us to say, oh, look, your mind is not damaged by all the mistakes you've ever made. You can, you know, move forward. You can learn how to not make those same mistakes again and again and again and again and again. But it takes effort. Nobody can do it for us. So it takes that, finding that motivation, developing that determination to make a change. And the determination isn't based on hating yourself. It's based on loving yourself and others enough to say, taking care of myself is worthwhile. You know? And it is worthwhile, even if it's just from the perspective, and I know this very intimately, of knowing that you're not harming someone else. You know? So that this, you know, this acknowledgement, if you have a habit of doing harm, that when you slowly, you know, start taking responsibility for that, then you really can be happy that, you know, oh my goodness, other people can feel a little safer around me. And that's a wonderful thing. So it's, you know, it's about really valuing the fact that we are interdependent, interconnected, so that, you know, nothing that we do or experience is just by ourselves alone. Even when it happens by ourselves alone. Because we carry our experiences, and depending on, you know, how we respond to our experiences determines whether we, you know, play it forward. And that, you know, we don't just play positive things forward or pay it forward, whatever the expression is. So much for that moment. You know, but we do it with negative things as well. So, but it's very changeable. I mean, if you look at your mind, how often does it change? In an hour? You know, you can go from interested to bored to, like, you know, completely like somewhere else. You know, I'm sorry, I've gone to Tahiti. I'm not back yet. You know, I mean, it's just like amazing how impermanent thoughts are. You know, so we really shouldn't have any doubt that it's possible to take charge of that. To say, okay, because we've done it in so many ways. We've learned how to behave at the office so we don't get fired, you know. We learned how to study for tests. We learned how to drive a car. You know, all these things require discipline, require focus, require remembering the steps, you know, and also implementing them. You know, that reading the instruction book may or may not help you when you actually do the task. So, you know, but we have these skills. So we don't need new skills. We need to decide that taking care of our mind is as valuable as taking care of our job. And since happiness and suffering are really an internal state, then why not see that as important? You know, we all know how much better the whole world seems when we're not stressed out. You know, it's so much easier to see, you know, what's going well when we're not stressed out. So it's worth taking care of the mind. I just have to say the title of what this strategy is in research. What we call taking and giving is something like self-regulated mental, no, it's just real, it's, you know, like.
Mental cognitive neuroplasticity.
Something, you know, I mean, it's just hilarious. I just, mental contrasting with implementatic intention, no, implementation, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The font was so big it was off the page. Mental contrasting with implementation intentions, MCII.
Oh, that's easy.
It is, makes perfect sense. It also, just to grab our attention, says from fantasy to action. So it's the difference between just daydreaming, why can't it go better, to going, why can't it go better? Well, I need to do this. This will help it go better, you know, so that we really have things we can do to help ourselves get to the state of mind that would make it go better. Doesn't change what's happening out here. Your child's still going through this excruciating, you know, treatment for their cancer. But it means, and what's important to you is that then you can be there for them. So what we need to value is every moment of interaction we have with each other, because that's really important to us. At the end of the day, just like we want to be there for our children, we want to be there for our loved ones, we want to be there for people in need, we want to be there when people, the emergency, the unexpected emergency with a stranger, we even want to be there, you know. So it's this recognition that taking care of our mind makes us more available in every moment to take care of ourselves and others. We don't get lost in the mix. We benefit from it. Yeah.
Like a million things are like flowing through my mind.
Grab
All
one.
these experiences I've had. Well, once I was thinking, one of the early ones, I mean, I've been studying Buddhism for a long time, but one of the early ones was noticing what I was feeling, or why am I feeling so crummy, you know, like after one of these exchanges, or why am I feeling so good after a different kind of exchange? And that was a beginning for me to realize that, you know, there's something worth looking into here.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. You know, noticing that we're not always this way or that. And so conditions matter to us. This is what the whole deal is about, buttons. You know, is this still on? See, I'm moving around. Sometimes I can hear myself. No, it's really loud. It's, you know, but sometimes I do this. Okay, good enough?
Yeah.
All right. I really do play with it. It's gonna break. So, but this is a very good point about, you know, being able to realize, well, there are sometimes that I seem to, you know, have it all together, and I feel really good about to look at those, to see what you can learn from those, and recognize there's a difference between those situations and the other situations that are, you know, where we lose it. And that's why that can start to give us clues about what are our buttons. What is it that's going on, you know? And you don't have to go into you don't have to be able to write a book on your neurosis or something. It's just about recognizing that to me, the clue is, how are you feeling during that interaction? Are you feeling, you know, uncomfortable or nervous or fearful, or, you know, and it takes a while to even really uncover that, because it all probably just starts with sort of an icky feeling. You know, it's not really precise. It's just sort of like ick. You know, but through that, we can, you know, by recognizing it early on, when it's just first that icky feeling, then we can be more discerning about what are the things that are triggering us. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that one, when I first realized one of my behaviors that was repetitive and I wasn't having too much luck, or wasn't making the effort correctly to change it, my teacher said, why, you know, it would be better if you stopped apologizing and addressed the problem.
Yeah, you can either spend the rest of your life apologizing.
Right.
You know, Rinpoche likes to say that. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is the head of all these FPT centers, likes to say, well, you can just do, you know, purification practice all day long. Purification is sort of a process of regret and wanting to do better. but not doing better. So the subject matter of every night when you purify your unskillful actions during the day seems to be the same, you know, like impatience arises quite frequently for me, you know, so it's kind of like that. So yes, and this gets back to that motivation, you know, that it's, and also the confidence that we can in fact do something about it. We don't know what. You know, we may have to keep searching for what this, you know, what to implement, but that it is doable, you know, and that if we just keep apologizing, perhaps our strategy's not working, you know. So, but we also want to be really clear that we can improve and still need to apologize. You know, I mean, that it's really a process, and that it's not like you have to measure your ability to do this or not by virtue of whether you've succeeded perfectly or not. Because that's, you know, that's asking too much. That's an expectation that is setting yourself up to give yourself permission to give up. So we don't want to set traps for ourselves. It's sort of like when you say to yourself, like, okay, I'm going to get up every morning for the next month and meditate for 37 minutes. Okay. And then on day two. Yeah, that doesn't happen. And then on day 3 you go, oh, I didn't do it yesterday, I might as well give up. You know, so, you know, because it's never about, you know, like for meditation, it really is never about, well, I showed up yesterday to meditate. It's, okay, am I going to show up today? It's all about, okay, today. So, because it doesn't even matter. We could have meditated every day for decades and decades and decades. If you stop, guess what?
Start all over.
Well, you don't have to start all over, but if, you know, that's part of the training. And it's also part of the nurturing, because we find that quiet space that always is available to us, and we know how to find it. But it's there, in spite of all the turbulence we're creating at the surface of our mind. You know, where we stir it, say, I'm sorry, I'm going to make soup today, you know, and it's not going to be very tasty. So, okay, let's take a minute, because I haven't done this in ages. I've been so slack to introduce yourselves to each other. So say hello. Good.
Sure. Yeah. Don't forget everything.
Nicole.
Oh yeah.
And you?
I'm from Michigan. Yes. I don't know about this. Kate, is that short for Catherine? Nice. Okay. Katie, Catherine. Good.
Everybody meet someone new? Well done. That leaves me. I haven't met a single person new. My name is Tendron. Tendron, which which is a Tibetan name, which I don't pronounce well, so don't bother learning it like I say it, because it's probably wrong. But that's how I say it. It's Tibetan with a southern accent. So, anyway, who's new?
That's Nancy.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you, Hope. Nancy, who's sitting next to you?
Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Mary's from Montana.
Wow. All right. Did you meet the people on the row behind you?
Yes.
Do you remember their names?
Nick.
Nick?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
And who are you sitting next to?
Next, I'm sitting next to my lovely wife, Denise.
Hi, Denise. And you introduce me to the person sitting next to you?
She's a little niece. She's my sister.
Ah, all right. Very brave of you to come together. So did you meet someone like in front of you?
Yes, I met Nicole, Evie, and John.
All right. John, did you meet anybody outside of that sphere? Okay. That's a good answer. Kevin, who did you meet?
Nicole,
Nicole.
Lou,
And that's Hope.
Ash.
And Ash. Ash, who'd you meet?
I met Kevin and Lou and Hope and formerly Chris.
And Chris?
Well, Ash and Hope.
All of them. Okay. Nicole, who'd you meet? Yeah, you know everybody.
I met Mary earlier and Joelle, but I know Joelle.
Oh, that's okay. Joelle, who did you meet?
I met Peggy and Bianca.
Beata, did you meet anybody new?
Yes. Bianca? Yes.
Judy. Judy, did you meet anybody new?
Yes.
Those same, the same circle.
Then I turned and I met this family, lovely family, mom and two daughters who are 11 months apart. But names, I'm sorry.
I met Judy, but I didn't remember her name until she said it, but I remember she's an artist.
You are an artist.
And I am an artist, and I met her, and I remember her sister has my name, but I can't remember her name.
Anybody back there know anybody's name?
I met him too, but I forgot his name too.
This is Sean.
Hi, Sean. Sean, do you know anybody's name?
Yeah, Jack, Ruben, Adrian, and Linda.
Young mind.
So unfair.
Okay, so who's Linda? Okay, Linda, did you remember the names of the people behind you? The artists behind you? No, okay. All
But
right.
I remembered Sean and Judy and Adrian.
You did good. I'm not criticizing what you did. Okay, lovely artist in the back row. Would you introduce yourself? Diana?
My lovely daughters, Kaylene and Charlize.
Thank you.
And I have one more, she's not here, my, Carly, my husband Carlos.
Wow.
They're not here today.
Well, thank
I
you
will
for.
bring them back.
Only willingly, you know, it's not a good look. Nice to meet you.
And we have Kate here
Kate,
from New York.
this is Steve, who's talking. And Kate, who's behind you?
Graciela.
Graciela.
Cole, Chris, Jack, Peggy, Tom,
Arlene.
hi Arlene.
And Jerry.
Don't forget Jerry.
We won't forget Jerry. No chance. Is that everybody? There's no test, don't worry. All right, wonderful. Okay, so let's review these steps of how to use our fantasy about how things could go differently and to, you know, into a more of an action approach. So what you want to look at are these questions. What is the best outcome you'd like? Like, how would you like it to go? You know, how would you, and most importantly, how would you like to be, as opposed to how you'd like the other person to be, because you don't have much control over that. So it's really about, you know, like picture the parent, you know, at the hospital, what is it they really want to be able to do for their child, you know, how they want to be with them through this treatment. So it's the same kind of thing. You want to look at it from the perspective of how, how do you wish it would go from your side? Because usually what we regret is what we do, it's not, oh, that didn't go well, and then we turn the parts that we're responsible for into guilt, and that doesn't help us much either. We want to turn it into active regret that says, oh, yeah, that didn't go well. I'm going to change it, and we try to come up with a new strategy. So you want to think about what the best possible outcome is for your side of the picture. And then, what is the main obstacle to fulfilling that? So this is looking at what for you is an obstacle to being able to be that way, so that you can address that. And that's the next one. How can I overcome this obstacle? And then, if this happens, have a plan for those triggers, those potential obstacles arising. As they said, let's get the person behind you.
I have an issue with frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And I get so frustrated that then I release, and I don't really want to do that. With my husband, because he's been sick for so long.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to overcome that frustration. It's like with surprises usually. In other words, he'll make a statement and it surprises me, and I try to get him to do something like over and over and over and over.
Yeah, and I think frustration often, we have to look, what is the source of the frustration? And it's often about something we can't control. So working with, okay, what can I control here? And it's usually only our response. So it's really being able to look at the frustration is coming from seeing that someone I love would be better off if they would do blah, blah, blah. Do many of us have that frustration? If they would only do this, everything would be better. But they're not cooperating, because they have a choice. And they also have disturbing emotions. They also have negative strategies, unskillful habits, and we can't get in their heads and change that for them. So to help us with our own frustration, it's about looking at our peace, which may be, I need to let go of thinking that they should do this. Yeah, it's a familiar frustration, isn't it? One thing we forget is that if it's really that bad, what can we do? Walk away. If you're not willing to walk away, what does that say?
Kind of holding on to something.
Well,
My idea.
wow, not a single person said, because there's more that I value about this relationship than this. You might choose to stay because you like the person and this is one thing. So, we want to remember why we stay and weigh that against the frustration. Now, my dad, until very late in life, would get up on a ladder on the porch, on the second story porch, to clean the gutters. My stepmom, it would just, she practically would have a heart attack. So she finally started to leave the phone on the step of the ladders and leave. She'd say, when you fall, call 911, because she could not handle it. And it would she'd want to just wring his neck. But to change. And yes, he could have been killed.
Did he ever fall?
Did he ever fall? I don't, well, he never told us he fell, so, but no, I suspect he didn't fall, but that's, a whole different story. He certainly could have fallen, I mean, it was an idiotic thing to do. If you want to risk your life, try that, But it's this, but the point of it is that sometimes we just have to distance ourselves from the situation because it's not going to change. And if we're still value the relationship, then we have to take care of ourselves in those situations, which might be walking away. Whether it's walking away from a relationship or just walking away from that conversation that's repetitive. We just really have to keep looking at, I know the holding on to the frustration is eating myself alive. I don't like feeling this way. It makes me yell at people. I just don't like anything about it. So what can I do to take care of the mind of frustration? One is you really do have to look at the fact that we can't make others cooperate. I mean, you can with a gun. But that's probably not the, really, all sorts of other consequences can arise. So it's about really, I mean, and it's not to say that, that someone, that your partner is not, taking your feelings into account, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes those conversations come up because both people are kind of doing the same thing, but it's hard. And it is hard to watch a loved one do something that really looks hazardous to their whatever. But then we have to look at ourselves and recognize we do the same. Look at that area in your life that you just don't make the change, even though you know you should. You're lucky in that maybe you're not experiencing any obvious consequences of it. But you don't do everything the doctor told you to do, or what the, AARP says to do, or whoever, But it's really looking at, do I want to hold on to this negative state of mind that makes me sick? Or do I want to recognize the limitations I have of being able to influence others? And be okay with that. Don't not feel like a failure just because you can't, It's like those old movies and probably old songs, like, you need to get your wife under control. Yeah, that makes me just, yeah.
Yeah, it was a situation where my husband's mother-in-law, she had dementia. And so he would take our 2-year-old, we would take our 2-year-old to see her, and her main happiness was giving him cookies and chocolate and ice cream. But she didn't remember she'd give him a cookie, so 5 minutes later she's giving him ice cream, and 5 minutes later she's giving him chocolate, and I had to stop going. Because, it was either that or she wasn't going to see her grandchild anymore, so we were risking his teeth, but...
So you brush his teeth a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, he's okay, he doesn't have diabetes.
Yeah.
Thank God.
But it's good that you say, like, you recognize that you couldn't tolerate it. That's like my stepmom just putting a phone on the ladder going,
Right.
good luck with that.
Okay.
Yeah, and having to just accept, because we really can't control. Our loved ones get hurt. They die. We die. And we just can't control, and we can't control the circumstances of that. But we can control our interactions with them as far as our side. So that we don't have those regrets afterwards when they do die. But this is, we're not going to be perfect. You should have seen me with my dad with the dementia. I mean, there were times where I just want to go, I'm really not your enemy. I may be looking like your enemy. I may be screaming at you like an enemy, but I promise I'm not your enemy. Just ignore how I'm acting. That doesn't work, by the way. So, yeah.
Brings up a lot of stuff, but since you just mentioned dying suddenly, one of my childhood friends called me a couple of days ago. She was coming in the house with her husband that lives in an apartment building in Riverdale, and the two grandchildren, and it looked like he was falling, but he was dead before he hit the ground.
Yeah.
Massive heart attack, 60 years old. The grandchildren, 9-year-old, is trying to give him resuscitation, and it just something he already knew about. The whole thing has been incredible, and just that idea that you don't know when you're going to die, it could happen in a second. And I didn't come home, but I would have. I said, "Do you need me? I'll be there." And she has such a big extended family, and my best friend and her best friend lives a block away. So she said, "No, I'd rather be with you when this is, So she told me that she talked only 3 minutes at the service. That both sons spoke beautifully, and all she said at the service, which she came out with, we met in a singles group, like 45 years ago. He said he was Italian, I'm Jewish. I said it's not going to work, and he pursued me. And she said he was right. We never had a problem with religion. We had problems about everything else.
Well, this is the thing. This gets back to that motivation of remembering that really, any moment, the relationship could end. How do you want to feel about what you said? And take responsibility for that. It's this is the thing. Now, of course, it'd be lovely if we could, in every moment go, oh yeah, this person I'm talking to could drop dead in the next moment. I hope I'm making a good moment. Not likely, is it? So, but we can do better. We can recognize that slowly over time, our persistent, unskillful actions take its toll on ourselves and others. So that recognizing our unskillful habits and then trying to apply some remedy to it is worth our effort. Just like it is, like when you realize, oh, I can't eat cupcakes anymore, or, I need to walk every day. These little things that we do to take care of our bodies, we need to also implement things that take care of our mind. Because our bodies are going to fail. But if we work on our mind, unless we get, a brain disease, it doesn't really fail. So we have it as a source of help in the worst possible moments if we have worked with it, supported it, and, recognized when it's not helping, and then trying to change the habit. We have a lot of habitual states of mind that really don't help us, so we want to kind of look for those and start to change them, because that reduces our suffering right away. And part of that, I think, with things like frustration and helplessness and all that stuff, is being able to sit with the truth of that suffering. That yes, we can't protect our loved ones. And it sucks. It's a real tragedy of our experience that people we love will get hurt. And people we love will hurt themselves. And that all sorts of horrible things can happen and do happen. And isn't that sad? And everybody's going through that. We're not alone in that. So being able to sit with, just like things like dementia. Oh, because it's terrible. And you can't change it. So, you know, the more we can get comfortable with the discomfort of not being able to do whatever it is. You know? I mean, can it be as simple as, you know, if things that aren't so heavy, but, you know, things like not being able to learn another language. You know? And so wouldn't it be nice if you could learn another language? I mean, I would love to be able to speak Spanish and go to the Miami study group and teach in Spanish. You know? I don't have that facility. So, you know, I can't help them in that way. And you just have to deal. So it's just these ways of recognizing, oh, I'm limited in what I can do, and that's okay. But there's suffering from that. And being able to acknowledge that helplessness, the anger that arises from frustration and helplessness, you know, that didn't feel good either. And so it's just about being able to, when that feeling arises, to go, yeah, this is hard. It's hard that we don't take better care of ourselves. It's hard that life is hard. All of it's hard. You know, and not, you know, not spinning a story out that implies you could maybe change that. You know, oh, if only I had done this, this, and this. That doesn't help. That's not skillful. Thoughts? Yeah.
So, like, to me, when I hear that, it's more like you're being at peace with whatever's going on. Like, frustrated, you're like, yeah, life is hard. That's, instead of you trying to change it, you're like, this is it, you know, like, because
You accept it.
that inner turbulence is creating more, you know, friction, or versus if you're just like, yeah, you know,
This is what it is,
this is it.
which, you know, we can hate hearing, but that acceptance is so important, and we resist it often, and that resistance is painful. You know, it isn't that, Shanti Deva said, you know, if there's a problem, you know, if there's a remedy to the problem, do that. Remedy it. You don't have to tolerate the suffering that you don't have to. But if there isn't, it's just like the serenity prayer. If there isn't a solution, you know, why worry? You know, the worry, why spend a moment of our time in such a fruitless activity? You know, it's the fruitless fatigue. Just because we're skilled at it doesn't mean we should continue to use it. But I'm good at it. You know? You know, sometimes we feel like the only things we're good at are our bad habits, but that's not true. So it's important that when we're looking at our minds, we also notice all the things we do really well. All those moments of generosity and kindness and patience, and, you know, we're really multifaceted. All the compassion that arises spontaneously when we see people suffering, these are great qualities. And the Buddha said this is our Buddha potential. You know, this is the proof that we have what we need, you know, in order to be able to respond more skillfully. We already have the qualities. It's just about, you know, understanding our mistaken states of mind that we think are going to help us, or we think that we can't have any control over because it's just natural to get angry or impatient and da-da-da-da. You know, it's natural because we're so habituated to it. But if it doesn't work, we can abandon it. Shall we go in now? Nap time. So, escaping is not a solution. As much as you may want to do that, it's not skillful. You know, so brief respites are okay. Escaping doesn't work. Yeah.
When you're speaking of, like, you know, being mindful of our thoughts, and I realize that any time there's some conflict, it's because there's my interpretation, as opposed to things are as such. You know, they are as they are, and anytime I try to make it otherwise, it don't fit. You know, and that's usually what I'm angry about, as opposed to the thing itself.
Well, and what's so funny is the amount of pride we have in thinking that we know better. We can simultaneously think our lives are a mess, but we still know better than you. It's like hilarious. So, you know. It's always easier to mentally control someone else's problem than actually to take control of our own.
Absolutely.
So, it's just not an effective strategy for happiness. Or for even having relationships at all. So, you know. Anyway, all right. What else? Yes.
Just since dementia came up like a couple times, my mom has it, and sometimes dealing with her, I love her to death, but
Of
it
course.
can be a handful.
That's
Requires
such a polite way to put it.
Yeah, it requires a lot of patience, and like I have to keep reminding myself, because with the work and everything, you're talking to people that are, if you want to say, at your same level, and then when I talk to her, I have to remind myself, oh, you're saying like 2 + 2 = 4. You know it's 4, but she thinks it's 5, and you have to just be okay with that. So, just with things going on with me, I've kind of taken a step back, and I know she's going downhill, and I'm doing what I can. Like, I bought her like some crossword puzzles and stuff like that. Like, I'm gonna go visit her today because I feel like I'm in the space to deal with it. But like, based on today, I'm gonna go in there knowing that, when we're talking, she's gonna walk around like a couple times, not pay attention to anything I say, and kind of go off on little tangents. And I'm trying to remind myself, all right, my plan will be like, this is what it is. You're there, do what you can, and then leave.
And I think it's really important when we're dealing with things like that,
Right.
is to recognize how invested we are. It is a terrible thing to watch your parent lose their faculties.
Right.
You depended on them when you were helpless, and here's this person who can't add 2 + 2, and it's kind of frightening. It's so we want to deal with that. And then also, you've lost your parent. They don't exist anymore. And that's, you're already an orphan.
Right.
And we want to deal with that, on our side, on our time, not their time. Because they can't help you with that anymore. So being able to recognize that part of our frustration and our intolerance with dealing with whatever their current manifestations of their illness are coming from our loss. Our sense of, I can't believe, and because I think some of the frustration is you really want to go, surely you can still, I remember the first time my dad couldn't write his name. He just kind of looked up at me like, what is my name? And I knew in that moment, he knew that he didn't know his name. And it was just this terrible loss, But if you can sit with your own suffering from it, it's a lot easier to be kind, instead of frustrated.
It took me a while to get used to the fact that I'm losing her.
Yeah.
And the earlier version of me would, I'm trying to like Google and say, oh, what can I do to slow this down and
Sure.
all this, and
If there's a remedy, that's a remedy.
But the reality of the situation is, there's, she could probably do things like, I'm trying to get her out of the house, but there's only so much I can do.
Right.
To at least kind of keep whatever's there, still there. But I
Don't go.
I think I'm more at peace that, this is going to happen. I lost my mom. I'm losing my mom, and I'm going to continue to lose her, and it sucks, but it is what it is.
Right.
All I can do is.
And that makes it a lot easier to be able to be there, because there are these moments that are, may happen, may not happen, but every now and then there are these moments that my dad would be as clear as a bell, and I was so grateful to have those moments, just because it was just like, how sometimes you wish, I just wish my mom would be here right now. Just, she's been been dead 40 years, but I just wish she was here right now.
Right.
You know, and so those moments were kind of like that. It was sort of like, oh, wow. So those are delightful. But they don't last, and you know, and if they live long enough, they don't reappear. So, but it's just this finding our way to handle the loss, like I said, on our own time, and you know, have a strategy when this, you know, when she starts pacing, or when she, you know, whatever, you know, I'm going to pace with her, make it like a walk around the building, you know, whatever. You know, you need to come up with them. But it's just ways in which for us to, so we don't go to that mind of frustration or do I have to put up with this? Because a lot of it, you know, unfortunately is about us. Oh, I can't stand coping with this, you know, because it's horrible. So, you know, we want to recognize that we're suffering in that moment, and sometimes our desire is to remove ourselves from our own suffering instead of being there for someone else. And we do have to have breaks. You know, we do, you know, it's all of these any situation that we find uncomfortable, you know, would be torture if we tried to tolerate them 24/7. You know, so. Okay, with these lovely scenarios in mind, so, but this is, you know, these things that move our heart, you know, to where we really can kind of surrender to the fact that life is hard, that we can't fix it, you know, but to come from that kind of soft place to be able to think, you know, I really wish, you know, all beings had what they needed to be happy, you know, and I'm happy to share what I have to help them be happy. You know, that kind of mind, you know, no, we can't do it, but it's just this, having that attitude of abundance and compassion, you know, it's helpful to our own skillfulness with our own peace of mind, of just being able to accept that life is hard. We can only do so much, but we can do that much. There's a piece we can be responsible for and do better, you know. So let's keep that in mind and rejoice that we've spent time. This is really valuable time, you know, to spend thinking about these things and, oh, how can I get a handle on my mind? Because our mind drives all of our actions. So the more that we can come from a healthy place, a loving place, and a self-loving place too. We have to take care of ourselves, you know. The better the energy around us is as well. It ripples out to help everyone. So let's read the dedication prayer on page 246. Do you want me to make the announcements first, Nicole?
Up to you. You want short meditation 101's tomorrow night. If anyone,
We're going to do the dedications first.
Okay.
But stick around for the announcements, even though that's a drag. You know, it's a community. You know, this is what we do. So, okay. May all beings everywhere, plagued by the sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with the mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too So if those of you who are interested in meditation but have no experience with that, or have just a little experience with that, on Monday nights right now for the month of February, we have Meditation 101 led by Jackie Keeley, who's a wonderful teacher of meditation. Thursday nights, Discovering Buddhism, for those of you who are interested in more in-depth information about the Buddhist path. We're talking about bodhicitta, which is the mind of enlightenment, which is, rich. It's a rich topic. So, but it's the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all beings.
Day of
Yes.
meditation on the 23rd.
Yes, so Jackie Keeley will also lead a day of meditation on February 23rd. It's a Saturday. I think you're welcome to come for the morning sessions or the afternoon sessions, and also all day. So, and that will be actually on developing the mind of great compassion. And then Yancy Rinpoche, who's the head of the Matripa Institute in Portland, which is a Buddhist university, is going to be visiting on Sunday, February 24th, so the next day. That'll just be a wild Dharma weekend. So, so he's lovely. He wrote Practicing the Path. But anyway, but he teaches, although he's Tibetan, he teaches in English. He's lived in the West a long time. So, that's it?
That's it. And our Losar, we're having a Losar sale in the shop. All the Buddhas are half off.
All the Buddhas are half off. Not cut in half.
I'm sorry, yes. Are 50% off. Most of them, I shouldn't say all of them, sorry.
And it's really good to think in terms of sponsoring Buddhas or adopting Buddhas, not purchasing Buddhas. It's all a mental thing. So, anyway, but,
Rehoming?
But it is nice if, they can be inspiring. So, okay, I think that's all I know. Set all we know. Set a positive intention for whatever you're doing next, and have a good afternoon. Thank you. You're doing a lot of signing today, Yak.
Are you coming
Back
to Buddhist
problems?
meditation tomorrow?
No.
Oh, no, okay.
No, not on Mondays.
One of these days, people will talk about hardcore.
Yeah, for sure. One of these times. Yeah.
Speaking of fun, I'm really having a lot of fun. Sci-Fi Channel has a new series out about the grandfather of Superman.
Oh, really?
I like better than the movie.
Yeah,
itself.
that's cool. I heard about that. I'm into that stuff too, so I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah.
I didn't know it came out yet. I knew it was supposed to.
Yeah, and great cinematographics, great acting, and really beautiful. Moral to the story too.
Well, this is the
I
summary
think
from
there's like
AG.
3 of the series already out. You can get it on demand.
I'll find it online. Trust me.
Have fun. Yeah.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
The internet, I find anything on that. I don't even have cable. I use the internet.
Good, go for it.
Get it for free.
Right?
It works.
Yeah, I mean, I pay $55 for my internet,
That's exactly what I do.
and then I don't need all those stations. I don't watch news. I keep that away.
really needed prescription glasses.
I'm getting.
Seriously needed.
Yeah, with the news.
It's funny how we just.
I mean, I put it like this,
I know, and I was telling
Other
my
than
friends,
getting me
and I was
upset
so
with
happy to be able to see it.
It's not really
Happy
informing me,
getting messages.
because those other things I can go and I can just read a story if I want to,
Yeah,
you know?
you realize,
And then I can be
it's like,
informed,
thank
as
goodness.
opposed
for
to
eyeglasses.
so-and-so hammering down how the world's gonna be over tomorrow by 5:30. You know what I mean?
Public TV, which I love.
Constantly.
But the thing is that news does nothing for you.
No, I
It just
know.
does
The
this.
week coming up. I was wondering if I'm going to be getting
Yes.
merit.
Yeah, I agree with you that
job.
I
Months ago, I was working at
realize
It's like
Comcast.
you and I can learn a fact, for say
My
a
bill
building.
is $500.
Okay, you and
Okay.
I relay that fact to you, cool, you know it.
That's it.
It's different if I sit
administrator,
in front of you.
and if my church finds out about this,
Crazy
if
for
I
me,
find
because
out
it'd be the
it's
same
important,
thing.
Four,
Yeah.
five, 6, 7 times
And
a
so,
day.
look at this,
An hour.
so we found out that it took
You
place
know,
before.
and then 24 hours in a day,
Don't
they
worry, we'll
repeat
zero
that
out your
thing.
balance.
So depressed.
1 hour cycle, they
Just
repeat
did his job.
So it's the most negative
Well,
instance
It's
of what's
nice when we
happening in the
can
world.
Indeed. Have a good
And
day.
we're gonna focus on just the negativity and ram it down your throat, as opposed
I know.
to knowing that, hey, there are good and bad things in life.
I know, as opposed to Fred Rogers.
Yeah. Mr. Rogers was a good guy.
But it's just a lovely,
Little known fact, he was a U.S. Marine. A lot of people don't
He
know.
also wanted to be a priest, right?
Yeah.
I think he
Yeah.
went to seminary.
He did. He went to seminary and then he decided to be.
Yeah, but I think he went back. So,
Really?
yeah, but it's interesting, but it's.
And he's a very complex person.
Well, what I just appreciated is that the documentary, really is talking to him about what, his beliefs are, and so it gives you some information. Plus, it's just nice to watch how, patient he was able to, be with the kids or whatever, or when he's just describing what, his theories were.
Great.
For me, I have my son is little at the time. I watch it all the time. I'm not really sure. Maybe he was a little older. But yesterday it was how he was able to make huge statements, being very kind. Like when he was washing his feet,
Yeah.
he tries to he didn't make any statement, but it was there. So I was thinking, this is about action too. Like you say, you can read a book, but what am I doing? What am I really doing to counter this? And he did it in a so non-confrontational way.
Yeah.
So beautiful. So I was thinking about this. That it was sort of for me, a reminder of things that that I as an individual may be able to do, something which I forgot, but what I wanted to say to you is that I'm a translator. I would be happy to translate for you if you want to hold my hand.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I've seen that. I went to Kafun and they had a gesture from Tibet. That was in Mila translated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would be delighted that it would.
Well, fortunately, they actually do speak English.
Oh.
But, sometimes you
wanna
just,
do it on your own.
yeah, you want to be able to, convey, and sometimes, of course, some students have trouble expressing their questions in another language, so because all of these students at the Miami City groups don't seem to have to speak English. Their jobs, they speak Spanish.
It's like a little community.
Yeah.
So they don't.
So they don't practice
feel
the
need
English
it.
a lot.
That's right.
So it's very interesting.
That's right. Well,
But thank you for that offer.
Yes.
That's a wonderful gift.
Well, if it ever comes up,
Yeah.
No,
that's wonderful.
Yeah, yes. And then there's always hope also to learn Chinese, so maybe you can.
I don't have an affinity for language. I tried French for 14 years and still couldn't do it. I mean, it's just interesting how, some things we can master,
take
yeah,
to,
and then others not.
Yes.
My dad did all sorts of work in Puerto Rico and he could never speak Spanish. So I guess we shared that in common, Oh, well.
Yeah, oh, well, there's so many other gifts you do have to give us, so, yeah.
How are you?
I am well, Vanilla Tendron. Today's class was just what I needed. It was just for me.
Excellent. I was teaching just for you.
It hit home because practice. do the best you can, and don't beat yourself up, that's it.
That's right.
Yeah, we're not Buddhists.
We're here, we're here.
We're here, right? We do what we can do, and we keep checking up.
Yes.
Yes. So, yeah.
That work out well?
Yeah. Everybody has their own karma.
Venerable
Yes.
Tendron, what is another retreat center? I know Vajrapani. What other, are there, no? Okay, okay, so, yep. Much more? You wanna let me know? Let me know. I have a call. So, the technology and Facebook, I can't stand it, you know?
I'm getting a new one.
Right, and okay, this is the thing, and it should be.
I don't even have a laptop.
Right, but that's okay, and then if you come, like, another thing we can do is, like, that I forget to do, because I have so much fun, it's like snap a photo of Venerable Tendron. You know, for the class, yes, see, that's another way, you know, the photo of the group, you know, so that people know what we do here, so there's a lot of confusion about what's going on, what we come for, you know, and Cecily's always telling me, we need more pictures of Venerable Tendron, you know, because the same one, I always forget, you know, so yeah, this was nice that you could always do one, you know, during the middle of the teaching or a few, and then you could also ask for, hey, can I see a picture of you, and also with a big smile, or something, you know, and so that would be hugely helpful too.
Sure.
And then you can also go and look back on, because she's been doing the Facebook, and she does the Instagram as well, so you can always kind of copy what she's learned, or what she's done in her area, you know? And then you just have a question, you just ask, and she's very good at helping, you know?
Posting quotes.
Yes, exactly, and then the thing, see, we've learned too, and so because we are SPMT, you know, we do kind of, to be safe, because there are many different traditions, and, you know, there are even people that don't hold you know, so we, just to be clear, we just try to stick with quotes that are from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and Lama Yeshe. So we just use those, and that's kind of how it's easy. So you might have to work a little hard to find this, but we use SPMT's website. You know, have you ever been on their website?
Yes.
There's a ton of information. I mean, I don't know if you were familiar with fpmt.org, you know, sign up for their newsletter. You know, this is another way, because they send a ton of information. It's fascinating. Once you sort of learn what everything this, that FPMT does, and then we're a part, you know, kind of a part of that, you know, we're not like financially supported by them, but even just the stories in here, it's amazing what Lama Zopa Rinpoche has done. I mean, I'll bring it mine, if you're interested, I'll bring it next to you, and you, because I've finished it. All right, thanks so much, Chris, and you could take it on your travels, and it's so inspiring. I mean, I just can't even tell you, John, so thank you so much.
Sure.
Because this would be huge, really, it would be so helpful.
I want to help.
Okay, awesome,
You
awesome.
can dedicate that time.
Yeah, exactly, and then if you feel like you have a big trip, or you're gonna be away for a week or a month or something, you let us know, and Cecilia may be happy to just pick it back up for a month, or we just kind of let it fly, you know, you just keep in touch with us as far as that stuff goes. So we have good communication, you know? And we've been putting together information for this position, so we're kind of, you know, trying to have more structure as well. So kind of laying it up to set you up so that you succeed. Okay? Okay. All right. Yeah, and you have to run on that stuff, because it's already set up. Our Facebook page, yes, so maybe
But you can
today.
add people and.
Yes, so I would say that, go home today and be our friend on Tutin Kunda Center, and just familiarize yourself with our page and what we have and our recent posts. Don't get too, you know, because Cecilia does amazing things, so don't be like, oh, I have to live up to those standards, not at all. She creates videos and stuff, all that stuff. Anyways, it would be awesome, thank you so much. Thank you, John. All right. No problem, no problem, no problem, no problem. All right, thank you, John. Have a good week too. And how are you all? Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's different, right? All right, cool. Well, good. You found some books. Wonderful. Yes, this is usually the one we give to newcomers, because this is what we aspire, right? To become our own therapist. How wonderful. It's a big aspiration, but we have to start somewhere, right? All right, you have any questions or? So we are a nonprofit, and you know, we do have lots of costs for the rent, the electricity, all these things. You know, so the memberships actually become a way to help us support the center and rely on consistent flow of income every month. And we are updating our memberships. So this is a way, you know, really, it's all about generosity and the practice of generosity, because every thing you offer is actually you get in the future, right? So you're securing your future to be full of resources. You know, I mean, it's really a state of mind, all of this. So little bits and pieces at a time, you know. So we do invite you for your first visit for free, just to check it out out of curiosity, to see what you like, or to see if you like it, and if it's, you know, kind of resonates with you, and if you do, then we welcome you to continue to come, and then just kind of whenever classes you feel drawn to. If you like the Sunday class, I don't know, you guys didn't come for the meditation this morning, right? Okay, so the Sunday meditation is something new we started. It's at 10:15 to 10:45, and it's a 30-minute meditation, and then we take a little break, and then we start this class. So it's really, really quite amazing, you know, to do the both. But hey, we can only, sometimes you just come for the meditation, or just the class, or both, whatever works for you. You know, so if you guys want to do like a family membership for the three of you, you know, we could probably do that, or something. And it's whatever works for you. Okay? So, and then if you're interested, like I said, I don't know if you grabbed the calendar.
Yes.
But yeah, and then you're all new to Buddhism, right?
Yeah.
Is that true, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so I definitely recommend Sunday's classes. If you're interested in meditation tomorrow, that's separate, that's evening, so that's a separate course. Our usual basic weekly program is the Sunday, the Tuesday, and the Thursday, okay? And that's kind of what is included in the membership cost, then the other things like the meditation, it's kind of a course, so that's like a $20 drop-in charge for that one. Then we do have these other weekend things, which are really nice too. And just depends on, like I said, once again, what you feel drawn to. We have guest teachers and all kinds of stuff, little meditation days here and there, little pujas as well. Yeah. So, and then so puja's like a prayer ceremony, where we set up a certain way for certain offerings for the Buddhas, and really it's not really even for the Buddhas, it's for our own minds, it's constant mind training. So we do a medicine Buddha puja every month and a Guru puja. The medicine Buddha is for healing mental afflictions to physical afflictions of the body, and then the Guru is for our lamas. You know, you could always just come, we kind of sit and read from a book, and it's these aspirational prayers that, different than today. Today's like a teaching, the pujas, it's a more, you know, and we just read, you know, but it's very nice, but to each his own, you know. Some people like them, if they're not, so. But yeah, and then if you're interested in the Thursday evening classes, that's also very nice, because we try to do a different module a month. It doesn't really happen like that. So this bodhicitta, this is this enlightened mind that wishes to benefit others, wishes to become enlightened so that we can benefit all other beings. I mean, with our square and everything.
Oh, you have a square?
Yeah, we have, yeah, see, I know. It's the register, it's the technology, I mean, it's another opportunity for me to learn stuff. Yeah, I know. Yes, please, and let me just make sure I can read these, because that's the only thing. I have WCASIMIR2@gmail.com and DLUNISE.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all right, wonderful. Oh, that's very kind of you, thank you so much. And you said.
Have a nice day, thank you for coming.
Okay, you can take it out. And would you like to receive? And the other thing like to tell newcomers is that Buddhism is a very big, complex idea, okay? So chances are you're gonna come across something you're like, I don't know about that. Don't worry about that stuff. Focus on the stuff that help and the tools that help and work for you, because there's lots of those. Okay? And same thing with the readings. When you come across something, just put on the shelf and say, you know what, later. Yes, please, have one. All right, bye guys, have a great day, okay? Thank you. Peggy, what are you still doing here?
I just washed the cup, so it will be ready.
Thank you so much. Did you hear Hope?
She asked if she needed something, but I didn't give her. Are you serious?
And I've kind of been like, you know, because we have a handful of CPAs, and I've just kind of been going, okay, one of these days.
She asked.
And she asked.
That's big.
That is big. So I'm like, yeah, and she is amazing.
She's been around a while
Yes,
too.
yes.
It's not like, okay, she's
Right,
that's
right.
like.
And she used to come a while, you know, at the beginning, and then she stopped coming for a little bit. She's one of those people that said, she came back. And I said, oh, it's so nice to see you. You know, I didn't even say So, but the thing is with the whole board, so I asked her just to become our treasurer?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
right, right.
Then,
Okay, and keep Don on the board.
right,
Okay, and he can kind of oversee for the next few
Exactly.
months, and he feels comfortable.
right.
Okay, okay, so then I'm.
I think it shouldn't really happen until you get back.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. I was thinking maybe, oh, I'm gonna reach out, ask him when they can maybe meet. I mean, maybe even if they just meet and talk about it first, you know, and then she has time to really think about it.
Right.
You
It
know?
could be the phone conversation.
Yes,
Doesn't
yes,
have to be
okay,
a-
exactly.
And-
Maybe we can do a three-way.
Right.
Cause she asked, you know, about the books, and I, you know, what do you use? I says, oh, you know, he uses QuickBooks. I said, you know, and Square, and I've really gotten Square so easy that everything's labeled and.
But she was, she could do all the stuff that we're paying
That's another
for.
thing I was thinking too.
I mean, we're paying the
Right.
guy,
Yeah.
like $1,500 or $2,000 a year.
Yes, yes,
She would be doing this for free.
yes, exactly.
Hello,
Yes.
it's like a no-brainer.
Right, right, exactly. So, oh, yay, yay, yay. And that's what I was thinking too. She's like, you know, I said, well, yeah, Don's our treasurer, he does our monthly, and then we have the
Right.
tax guy, you know, exactly. So,
I mean, this is like a dream.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Tempton has asked me a couple times, how much we pay for that guy to do that? And I said, oh, I have to look it up.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, when Don and I did the budget for this year, it's like a couple $100 a month. You know? And the more we get organized, the more it's easier for someone just to take it
That's
over.
what she does. It's gonna be
Yes.
so easy for her. She won't have a question. She'll know what
Yes.
everything means.
Yes, exactly. I know, I know, after my like emotional week between my parents and then just everything, you know, I was like, and then Lauren's teachings this weekend was so like, it's just what I need to hear. And yes, like my level, right? You know, and I know I have my vacation, my trip, my retreat coming up, so I'm like, I know I can do it, I know I can make it,
I can get there.
you know? And then meanwhile, Rogers is going, Dee Dee, we have like, you know, this picnic for our 10-year anniversary, 50 to 70 kids in Nepal,
Oh.
because it's our 10-year,
Right.
since we opened our door 10, so the kids that came 10 years ago are coming, are invited for this picnic. So I get to see all my, you know, and that's when I really got to know the first group, because I was there for a year. So I really got to know I know,
And
I'm
now
gonna
to
be.
see what they're doing,
Yes.
what they're like.
Yes, I know.
What is that? It's staying for different, I have to stay somewhat connected.
Yeah, yeah. So it is. It's like so much like emotions and like, you know.
So were the boundaries helpful?
Yeah. And I mean, and the therapy, Gary loves the therapy. We missed 1 week because I was traveling, and he's like, oh, are we going to therapy on Wednesday? And I said, no, honey, I'm with my parents. Oh, well, because I really wanted to go. At first he was complaining about the
Something you're doing
45,
together.
yeah, the 45-minute drive, and now he's like, no problem, I drive. You know, we have our homework, you know, yeah. I mean, he's, yeah, but I'm ready for change.
Right, but this whole thing today,
Yes.
you know, if you don't give up, then you have to make it work.
Yeah, exactly. One small positive thought in the morning can change your entire day.
Where is he?
He's off today, and he, you know, keeps on asking me about the center, and I'm like, you think about long enough, you'll answer your question, and he does now, because, you know, he asks, oh, what's introductory classes? Think about long enough, you'll know the answer, and he'll tell, oh, yeah, today. Okay, oh, what time? I'm like, whenever you're ready. social about his mom, thinking about, we're selling the house, we're putting the house on the market. But it's time, my parents are moved in, they're so happy and less, and just, but they're like, my mom's telling me I got a new washer, dryer, refrigerator, like, oh, as if they could just clean the house, mother.
Right.
But, now they don't have to worry about the two houses.
But she is not having a heavy part, so that makes you feel good.
Yeah. I mean, they've been, the last year and a half has been so stressful for them, and now it's like, okay, yeah, and we don't have to worry about money. We got all, my dad's life's work is in their bank account. So, and they have family. My dad,
Where is it? What town has it? Gainesville?
Floral City, south of Inverness. So Orlando, West, Claremont, and Howard.
Right. Okay.
So they're probably like a half an hour, 45 minutes from the West Coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long does it take you to get there?
4.5 hours.
How long would it take to get to Gainesville?
I think like the same. Maybe a little more. Yeah, maybe like a half an hour or so difference.
Right.
They're probably within an hour of Gainesville, maybe. So yeah, but similar. Yeah.
So, while you're gone, Leon is gonna do a bank deposit?
Yeah, that's what I need to, maybe I will just have Beata, because she can't just go to the bank and make a deposit, right? Right? I would need that.
Yeah, all you have to do is fill out a deposit, so it's just like the drawer, Adrian's pretty good with that.
Yeah.
So Adrian can make out a deposit slip and
Maybe I'll ask Adrian to do the deposit, because Beata tends to seem like.
right. I mean, I could even do this deposit myself if, it's left in the safe or whatever.
Well, that's what I'm trying to, that's what I want to tell Adrian to do, because I feel like Adrian's better than my Sunday people, because my
Right,
Sunday people.
right.
So I even told her, I say, hey, listen, if you come on a Thursday and, there's
Put it in the
changes,
safe.
yeah, we just put it in the safe and
Right.
whatever's
And
in
the
there
date,
in the
right.
safe. Maybe if you just
I can
do
definitely.
that like just once.
Right.
On like the 10th.
Yeah.
Then I think that should be good.
Okay.
So.
But we have money in the bank, so it's not like we have to cover it, and we're not gonna have guest teachers, so we're not gonna have big impact.
Right.
And so much of our income comes with the credit card.
Yeah, and that goes straight in, so, yeah. Oh, Maggie, thank you. It's like, when I've been going through my week, it's like just reaching out and thinking of all, Venerable Tenor has been so wonderful. And Cecilia, so thank you, because it's like. So she doesn't have one, and she doesn't want one.
Okay.
And, we've talked about like, okay, well, I'm just gonna let you know, and I even had a conversation with her the other day, and I said, listen, Venerable Tenor, because I think for a while too, she was really feeling like she wasn't needed or wanted, so I remind her, I'm like, do you have any idea, like, how much people really like you? People, because she tried telling me, I think Rebecca made a mistake having me a real teacher. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't.
First of all, Rebecca didn't make that decision, Mama Zoka did.
Right, and she was saying, I don't know if the center needs a resident teacher. And I'm like, well, I don't,
It's all part of it.
Exactly,
We can't
exactly.
have enough visiting teachers to keep it going. Tuesday night,
Exactly.
Thursday night, Sunday.
Exactly, and that's what I tell her, I'm like,
Sunday, we're helping all these people.
yes, exactly, and they come back, and even if they move away, they're still watching from afar, and so I'm just trying to remind her that, and so I told her the other day, I said, listen, I understand, it gets to be a lot, the possibilities are, there's a lot of possibilities. If you ever feel like you just, want to do 6 months, well, we'll figure it out, you know? Because I could imagine maybe Paula in the future, or Venerable Amy, and she's talked about Venerable Amy and Venerable Carol, you know, one of them getting a house in Century Village because it's so affordable, and who knows, maybe there's a little nuns community, and then they rotate, who knows? You know, I like to think big and open, that.
I think as long as we, you know, we let her know.
Yeah.
How much she's appreciated.
Right. Exactly, and that's what I'm trying to remind her, that, yeah, and encourage people to help her and reach out, and I said, nothing, you wanna help her with her bags, you gotta be right here when she comes in.
Yeah.
And so she was, you know, and so that's how we learn, you know, when we show her each little time, we're trying to get better at taking care of her. And, you know, and she went out with Pam the other day, we just have to keep on, when we're having lunch tomorrow, we're